As the blaring sound of the cell phone alarm pierced through the quiet morning, Keith groggily reached over Nettie, who was nestled next to him in their shared bed. Nettie, with her non-conductive skin, couldn't interact with the screen, and instead handed the phone to Keith to shut off the alarm. "Can we just have 5 more minutes?" Keith mumbled, his voice muffled by the pillow. "No way, come on," Nettie urged as she sat up and removed her charging glove. The two siblings had made a deal with their mother to wear pajamas while in bed since the start of the school year. They had also discussed their approach to social media, wanting to help others but not actively seeking attention for it. They hoped to bring awareness to heat stroke and other common dangers for students with the help of a coach. Their mother, Cassie, had even gone as far as setting up a cot in their room to give the illusion that they were not sharing a bed when company came over. However, this was a rare occurrence, as it was usually just Jack or Candace visiting. The previous night, there had been an argument about Keith and Nettie attending homecoming together as brother and sister. It had kept everyone up late, yet Nettie was still fully charged. As Cassie walked into their room at 5:30 a.m. ready for work, she gave them some news. "Okay, you two, you can go to the homecoming dance," Cassie announced. "I read about people going in groups if they didn't have dates, so call Jack and tell him to grab Candace. I'll rent you guys a limo to make it extra special." Nettie excitedly pulled on her rabbit-eared hoodie, while Keith did the same with his matching one. Cassie asked if they had gotten enough rest, playfully teasing them about the 5 hours they had managed to sleep. "We got at least 4.5, Keith joked back. Nettie stretched her arms out, showing off their matching bunny suits that they had gotten as a joke when their mother scolded them for being too affectionate in bed. "I'm at 100% charge," Nettie exclaimed, proudly displaying her fully charged status. "That's good for 16.67 hours. Cassie nodded knowingly. "That should give you enough time after school before the football game starts at 5 p.m. Just make sure to come home and charge for at least 3 hours so you have enough energy for the dance later." The two siblings grinned, excited for the day ahead of them. Despite their playful banter with their mother, they were grateful for her support and understanding of their unique situation. With a smile, Nettie gazed at her fully charged phone. "That'll bring me back to 100% even before the dance," she said. "It gives me a chance to dress." Standing up, she twirled and pretended to dance. "If I plugged in at 2:20 p.m., I'll be at 100% at 4:39 p.m., which will give me 15 minutes to prepare and 5 minutes for us to get to the dance." Keith shrugged his shoulders. "That's cutting it close, but okay," he replied, excitement evident in his voice. "It's going to be a fun night." "Yeah, and I want you to have enough charge for 16 hours because I know what goes on after homecoming," Nettie joked, winking at Keith. "We'll think of something to do," Keith chuckled. Nettie smirked as she remembered their conversation with Jack's father about their plans for the evening. "Well, I talked to Jack's father, so I know a little bit about what you'll probably be doing, and it involves that backyard pool of his," Cassie said as she turned and walked away. Keith and Nettie's jaws both dropped in unison as the door closed behind their mother. They looked at each other in shock and disbelief. "Oh my God," Keith whispered urgently. "Yeah, she knows what we do," Nettie agreed with equal urgency. "No!" Keith hissed in frustration. "I'm more worried about what she thinks is going on in that pool than what she knows." Nettie's eyes widened as realization dawned on her. She understood Keith's concern immediately. "We can always tell her," Nettie suggested, trying to ease Keith's worries. "That way she doesn't think we're doing it." But Keith shook his head firmly. "No wonder Mom kept us up late freaking out about the dance," he muttered. "Anyway, I need to start getting ready." With a quick kiss, he stripped out of his bunny PJs and hopped into the shower, eager to start the evening's festivities. After a long day, Keith and Nettie finally joined Candace and Jack at their usual booth in the cafeteria. Nettie strategically chose the side with a small hole in the wall, allowing her to discreetly stash her food while they talked. Keith sat next to her on the outside of the booth, opposite from Candace, while Jack sat across from him. "How are you doing?" Jack asked, his casual question causing Keith to feel uneasy. "What the hell did you do, Jack?" Keith exclaimed, watching as Nettie slyly dropped a piece of cake through the hole in the wall while hiding it with her open laptop. Jack simply shrugged and shook his head. Nettie peeked over her laptop towards Candace, who gave her a concerned look. Making sure her arm was hidden from Candace's view, Nettie dropped a chicken breast and leg into the hole. "Is something wrong?" Nettie asked nonchalantly, pretending to contemplate eating her green beans with her fork. Meanwhile, Keith eagerly devoured his mashed potatoes. It's about Marissa and Dean. You know how they're going to prom together even though Dean is dating Chris and Angelica? Jack said. I try not to pay attention to what those jackasses are up to these days, Keith replied dismissively, stuffing more mashed potatoes into his mouth. Well, it's just not right. Dean is an athletic guy and Marissa has a great figure. If they enter the prom competition, they'll definitely win prom king and queen, Jack explained. I don't think either Keith or I have ever cared about those superficial competitions, Nettie interjected, shaking her head as she dumped an entire bowl of green beans into the hole in the drywall next to their booth. Yeah, well, we kind of signed you two up for prom king and queen, Jack revealed with a mischievous grin, waiting until Keith had a mouthful of green beans before dropping the bombshell. The clattering of Nettie's fork against the table echoed through the lunchroom as Jack was suddenly met with a barrage of green beans fired from Keith's mouth at the very mention of sharing school royalty with Nettie. Candace watched in shock as her boyfriend wiped the food from his hair, unfazed by the unexpected attack. The room fell silent as many students turned to witness the spectacle. Nettie closed her laptop and leaned back in their booth, a mischievous glint in her eye. The chatter in the diner died down slightly, all attention now on Jack and his reactions. He leaned forward, curiosity and frustration evident in his expression. Wait, you guys are like the dream team, he exclaimed. You saved Kyle from that bully last week, and before that, at the beginning of the year, from heat stroke, and then you helped Mr. Thompson out when the inspectors showed up to check for computer games. And let's not forget how half the school staff adores you too. Keith let out a sigh and glanced at Nettie, who leaned in closer to whisper to him. Remember our plan? She reminded him. We can pull off pretending to be siblings at prom since we're in the same friend group, but being crowned king and queen would be taking it too far. Jack nonchalantly shrugged his shoulders, as if the potential consequences of their actions were of little concern to him. Kings and queens have a long history of keeping it in the family anyway. Look at Buckingham Palace. Jack attempted to rationalize their plan with examples from across the globe. Mom is going to be ecstatic, Keith sighed, his frustration evident in his tone. Not like we would have won any dance competitions anyway, so I'm not too worried. I actually signed you two up for a karaoke duet with the band, Candace interjected, flashing a mischievous grin. That's your gimmick. Oh, Keith hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Well, Nettie chimed in, smiling proudly at her brother and best friend, we are kind of good at singing. Correction, you two are freaking phenomenal at singing, Jack declared, throwing a half-chewed green bean off his shoulder. That's why you're going to win, and Dean can just suck it. We still need to pick a song, Keith reminded them. Yeah, and we have practically no time to practice, Nettie added, her brows furrowed in worry. Guys, Jack interrupted, pointing to Nettie's plate. Can we talk about the real issue here? Your sister didn't just eat the meat off the bones of her chicken. She devoured the entire damn bird. Candace leaned forward, her eyes widening like saucers as she gazed at the plate in front of her before looking back up at her bestie. What the hell? She exclaimed, disbelief etched on her face. Oh no, I just sacrificed the bones to the food gods of Dodson High, Nettie explained with a sly smile, pointing towards a discreet hole in the wall next to their table. Jack nodded approvingly. Good girl, he said, giving Nettie a knowing look. Candace nodded along with Jack, understanding the weight and responsibility that came with their secret rituals. Keith chimed in, breaking the tense moment. So, Mom told me that your dad spilled some of our backyard secrets. Looks like they're out now. Well, that's okay because we're not planning on skinny dipping in the pool after prom tonight, Jack announced, causing Nettie and Keith to exchange excited glances. I trust everyone has at least $30 to spare? He asked. What are we doing? Nettie inquired curiously. We're going to Santa Monica Pier after prom, Jack declared proudly. We'll take Uber XL and it'll cost us about $35 each round trip. Nice, Keith exclaimed. I love that idea. We can always go for a late-night dip in the pool when we get back, Candace suggested with a mischievous grin. I already told my mom I was staying at Jack's tonight. Nettie couldn't help but feel slightly envious of Candace's easy arrangement with her parents. She's letting you sleep at Jack's house? She asked incredulously. Candace simply shrugged. Why not? You two share a room every night and clearly love each other. She gestured between Nettie and Keith before taking a bite of her chicken. Really cute, by the way. Nettie rolled her eyes good-naturedly, understanding that Candace was just using their living situation as an example to justify her staying over at Jack's after prom. Do your parents know about this? Jack asked with a grin. Candace sighed and shrugged nonchalantly, causing Nettie to let out a small giggle. They all knew that the answer was most likely no. Candace spoke with a hint of resignation in her voice. They've always known that I don't follow the rules, but they still want to make sure I do it wrong in the right way. They trust me to know my boundaries. Jack interjected with a playful wink and nudge towards his girlfriend. In response, Candace leaned over and planted a kiss on Jack's lips in front of their friends. Are you two really doing it? Keith asked, bewildered by their open affection. Jack and Candace exchanged smiles before shaking their heads. No, Jack replied. As chill as my dad may be, sex is off limits everywhere. And besides, you two straight arrows have rubbed off on us. We're waiting for the right time, Candace chimed in. Yeah, doing it right is worth the wait. Suddenly, Nettie turned towards something that caught her attention. The group followed her gaze to see Marissa and Dean approaching their table. Jack quickly hopped up onto the backrest of his seat, ready to jump out if needed. What do you guys want? He asked with a bit of attitude. You know that challenging us for prom king and queen was just a ploy to secure your own win, Dean sneered. But to end up as king and queen with your own sister? That's just sick, Marissa added with disgust. Yeah, that's kind of disgusting. Are you two planning to go home and sleep together after the dance? Dean chuckled at his own joke while everyone at the table looked on in shock. What does it matter to you? Jack retorted. While they may not be sleeping together, you're sharing Angelica's rank crotch with Chris. Do you get sloppy seconds? Or do you get first dibs since you're dating her? He then turned to Marissa. And what about you? How does it feel to be friends with a guy who has to share one girl while you stand on the sidelines with your prom queen crown? Tension could be cut with a knife as the group faced off under the fluorescent lighting. Marissa's hands were clenched into fists, her teeth gritted as she faced Jack. Her body was hunched forward, as if about to strike him in anger, but instead of following through on her threat, she gestured towards Keith and Nettie with a look of challenge in her eyes. If you two drop out now, she began, we won't tell the whole goddamned world about your little secret. Keith raised an eyebrow at Marissa and Dean, his gaze then shifting to Candace, who sat beside him. Nettie stood by his side, her posture tense but defiant. We're not, Nettie stated firmly. That's not what everyone will think if you go to prom together, Marissa pressed on. But if you win this competition, I'll make sure they know anyway. Think about that. I think everyone knows us well enough right now, Nettie shot back, and they can see through any lie you try to weave. In that moment, Keith felt a sense of pride, knowing that both Nettie and their mother shared the same values of honor and integrity when it came to their relationship. He respected Nettie and their mother too much to cause any more trouble or secrets for them to keep beyond the fact that Nettie wasn't a human being. Do you and Chris take turns with Angelica? He asked mockingly. Or do you both have your fun at once? Keith's eyes widened in shock and his brows furrowed in disgust as he imagined such a scenario between his ex-girlfriend, Chris, and Dean. Nettie in turn looked away and ran her hand through her dark brown hair as if trying to distract herself from the conversation. Candace, on the other hand, nodded thoughtfully at Jack's question. Dean had had enough and grabbed Marissa's hand, leading her away from their table with a look of disgust on his face. The sun had set, casting a warm orange glow over the room as Nettie's glove showed a full 100% charge on her hand. Keith stood in his crisp suit, waiting for Nettie to slip into the dress their mother had specially picked out for her. With a grin, she rolled out of bed and removed her glove, taking a moment to admire her brother's appearance. You look quite dashing, she said with a wink. Keith returned the compliment with a smile before turning around to give her some privacy to change. Ever since their embarrassing incident at the lunchroom, he had made it a point to respect her privacy. It seemed ironic, considering they often went skinny dipping together with their friends. Okay, you can turn around now, Nettie called out. As he turned back towards her, Keith couldn't help but stare in awe at his sister's slender figure in the stunning red dress that perfectly complemented dark brown hair. She smiled back at him, her eyes squinting with joy at his reaction. Wow, he finally managed to say. You look equally wow, Nettie replied, winking playfully. So we have a fully charged glove, a prom competition, and 2 bullies to put in their place. We could do a duet or maybe even a dance. Everyone will be dancing. But you want to sing, right? Like Jack recommended? I can't believe he roped us into this, Keith sighed. He's your friend, and he did it for a good reason. He knows how talented you are, Nettie reminded him, placing her hands on his shoulders and looking up into his eyes. You're a natural performer, and I can sing too. So now it's just about picking the perfect song. Well, what do you prefer? Keith asked. I haven't heard your full range yet. What kind of songs can you handle? Nettie inquired. We only have 20 minutes to decide, so do you have any songs you particularly like? I'm not sure how to make that decision, Nettie admitted. Yes, you do. If it's not in your programming, make an exception, Keith urged, his voice laced with excitement. I want to see what you would choose under our circumstances. Something that represents something important to you, something meaningful maybe, and yeah, maybe even something I can be capable of singing also. A mischievous laugh escaped him at the end of his request. You just want to see me make decisions for us regardless of the song? Nettie questioned, raising an eyebrow in playful disbelief. Let me see you decide on something for us instead of me doing it, Keith insisted, a hint of challenge creeping into his tone. Nettie searched his eyes, her own sparkling with amusement. She smiled lovingly at him before shrugging her shoulders and settling onto the bed. Keith joined her, their bodies comfortably close as she pulled out her cell phone. With a flick of her stylus, she began clicking through songs until finally flipping her phone around to show Keith. Keith's eyes roamed the screen, taking in each song title and artist before looking up at Nettie with half-opened eyes and a slack jaw. Really? He asked incredulously. Not very original considering what our conversation was about. I like irony, Nettie declared with a laugh, her eyes twinkling mischievously. Keith and Nettie made quite an entrance as they arrived at the dance in a sleek black limousine, rented specially for the occasion by their mother. Jack and Candace, also dressed to impress, stepped out of their own car. Keith couldn't help but gawk at his usually casually dressed best friend, looking sharp and put together in a freshly ironed suit. Candace's simple yet elegant black dress stood out against her pale skin, highlighting her features perfectly. As the group approached the doors of the gymnasium, which had been transformed into a dazzling dance floor for the evening, they could see Marissa and Dean pointing them out to some adults wearing chaperone stickers on their clothes. Dude, something's not right, Jack observed as the adults walked over towards them before they could even enter the doors. Keith and Nettie? The woman who had a sticker reading Lindell asked as she waited for them to confirm. Yeah, Keith replied, unsure of what was going on. Are you two signed up for prom king and queen? Lindell questioned with a disapproving frown. Keith glanced down at her dress and back up to her face. He then noticed the man standing next to her with a similar chaperone sticker that read, Charles. Behind them, Marissa stood with arms crossed over her sparkling blue dress. Yes, we are, Keith confirmed cautiously. Well, Lindell put her hands on her hips and shook her head disapprovingly. There's no rule against siblings attending the dance together, but to have a brother and sister signed up for prom king and queen? That's never been done before, and I think we need to discuss it further before allowing it. What the hell? Jack exclaimed from behind them, clearly caught off guard by this turn of events. You two need to go inside before we eject you from the premises, Charles chimed in sternly. Keith turned to Jack and shook his head, silently pleading for him to not make a scene right now. You good? Jack asked in a hushed tone. Got it. See you in a minute, Keith replied, trying to keep his cool. He then turned back to face Charles Lindell. Just because something has never been done before doesn't mean it's against the rules. But you're her brother. Even if she's adopted, it's not morally or ethically correct, Lindell argued firmly. I'm sorry, but you two can still attend the dance, but being prom king and queen, that would be unacceptable. Keith felt his heart sink at her words, knowing that this was going to cause quite a stir and possibly ruin their night, but he refused to let them give up without a fight, especially for something as trivial as being siblings. Nettie stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly as she faced off against Marissa's parents who were trying to bully her brother. Her stance was strong and unwavering, a clear indication that she would not back down easily. Her voice rang out with authority as she spoke. There's no rule against it. And if you try to make one now, you'll have to go through the proper channels and petition the school system. Any new rules must be voted on. Marissa's parents, Charles and Lindell, sneered at her words. We don't need to follow any rules. We're making the rule right now, and there's nothing you can do about it. Charles declared arrogantly. Nettie remained undeterred, calmly stating, "You're just a couple of parents of a student that's competing for the same crown. And if you try to stop us from being your daughter's competition for that crown, we can file a conflict of interest complaint to the school board under the circumstances. That is within the rules." Lindell huffed in frustration and stomped away while Charles stood in their way like a bouncer at a club for teenagers. Marissa spoke up, trying to intervene, but Charles brushed her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Quiet, sweetie, let us handle this," he said condescendingly. Keith exchanged a knowing look with Nettie as they watched Lindell argue with the principal at another entrance. The same man who had praised them for saving Kyle's life just weeks ago. The principal eventually walked over to Marissa and Charles with an irate Lindell trailing behind him like a heat-seeking missile. "Did you two really sign up for King and Queen?" Principal Copeland asked with disbelief written all over his face. "Yes, sir," Keith replied confidently. "We've been practicing for it for a while now. We have all the time in the world to perfect our routine." The principal glanced down at his tablet and raised an eyebrow at Keith's response. He looked back down at his tablet as if double-checking before addressing them again. "There seems to be a slight issue," he said, tapping the screen thoughtfully. "You see, usually the competition is a dance, not a karaoke duet." Keith grinned, eager to prove himself and Nettie. "But we're both really good singers," he declared. Nettie nodded in agreement, her confidence unwavering as she added, "And there's no rule stating that siblings cannot participate in the competition together." The principal chuckled, clearly impressed by their determination and talent. "Well then, I suppose there's nothing stopping you two from competing for the crown," he said with a smile. "I hope so," Principal Copeland said with a hesitant sigh. "Well, all right. You've done a lot for the school already, and your sister is right. This isn't technically against any rules." But Lindell was not satisfied. She crossed her arms and spat out her words with contempt. "Sir, what would the school board think? Savior of student siblings singing to their heart's content just a week after saving another student from death?" Principal Copeland put air quotes around his words as he spoke. "Something like that." He then looked down at Keith and Nettie, offering them a slight smile. "Knock 'em dead," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "Can't wait to see your performance, and welcome to homecoming." Keith and Nettie exchanged smiles before walking into the gymnasium together, leaving the angry family behind. Marissa ran past them in search of Dean. They were given directions by a group of parental volunteers that their performance would be in an hour, and they would go last. They were also informed that they would be expected to stay on stage until the votes for the winner were counted. "I can't believe she brought her parents in," Jack grumbled as he poured vodka into the punch bowl. "What kind of underhanded cheating is that?" "Marissa's parents are very invested in her education," Nettie explained, "and she's a big problem. First it was about maintaining the school's high scores, now it's about winning prom queen." She pushed her hands into her non-existent pockets, a programming glitch that made her feel smaller in social situations. "I wasn't aware of this," Jack admitted with a shrug. "Yeah," Candace chimed in. "We're talking about scholarship material here. If Nettie ends up taking the valedictorian title instead of her, we're talking Yale, Harvard, Stanford, New York University, all the top schools that rich socialites crave." Nettie let out a deep sigh and looked to Keith for support. He shrugged, his eyes conveying that he understood exactly what was on her mind. She then turned to Marissa, her posture straightening with a hint of defiance in her eyes. "But the homecoming title doesn't have any impact on scholarship opportunities, right?" Keith asked, trying to ease Nettie's worries. Candace scoffed at his question. "Oh, please, that's just for show." This revelation eased some of the tension in Nettie's shoulders. For now, she could take comfort in the fact that their hard work would not go unnoticed, even if they didn't win the homecoming crown. "Let's make Marissa and Dean look like amateurs tonight," Keith said with a confident smirk, earning a playful wink from Nettie in return. They were determined to give it everything they had and prove to everyone that they were not to be underestimated.